Hello, I'm Mitra Sorrells in the PhocusWire studio at Phocuswright Europe, and I am joined today by Nicole Forson. She is CEO of Mozio. Welcome.
Thank you.
And Aaron Gowell. He is co-founder and CEO of SilverRail. Welcome, Aaron.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So let's talk, first of all, one of the things that's gotten a lot of attention in the last year is, of course, this ban in France on short-haul flights. Flights are banned if the trip can be made by a train in under 2.5 hours. Aaron, how impactful is this, and do you expect more countries to follow suit?
Yeah, we do, and it is impactful. It's interesting to watch how this is evolving. There was a lot of talk early on in the space about, like, will the consumers actually choose greener options? And what we're seeing is it's not really the consumers choosing these things, it's more governments and companies actually making decisions on behalf of the consumer. And so you're seeing France getting serious about reducing carbon emissions, and they've knocked down 4 of the local flights in country. They'll still take inbound international, but in country, like Paris-Lyon, is getting shut down.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, will have a big impact for a couple of reasons. One, OTAs, if you want to sell the hotel in Paris and you have customers that are out in Lyon and all that flow, you now have to have the ground transport product there. And we've yet to see any major OTA really adopt rail in a meaningful way. But what we have seen is companies like BCG has made a commitment, Boston Consulting Group, which has tens of thousands of employees, commit to being net neutral by a certain date. And so they are then pushing their corporate travel agencies, they are pushing these carriers to give them the kind of product and help them go green. And that has led to things like Google now saying sustainability is at the forefront of their own decisions.
Yeah.
And they're now integrating our rail, into their main search engine,
Right.
which will go live in the next couple of weeks. So it's interesting to see how the evolution is. Everybody talks about the consumer, but it's the other actors in the space that we're really seeing this behavior from.
Yeah, and that's interesting, that ripple effect then that starts to take place. But I'm curious, either of you, if you have perspective, do we start to need a lot more capacity in ground transportation? Is it there? What are you seeing?
Well, very similarly to Aaron, what we've seen is we've created a site that gives the option of green, transfers, carbon emission neutral transfers, things like that. And when it comes to the actual client or the customer, they don't tend to book them. They're always choosing the cheapest option. But where they come in is when a company, so someone like, say, a Virgin Airways or something says, actually, we're going to insist on these things, and then it comes through.
Right.
But when it's given directly to the consumer, they choose, at least in our experience, the cheapest option. But when a partner of ours chooses, which ground transportation company, they want those ones with the green options. And now it's looking at ways to ensure consumers actually choose the green option. So I guess there's 2 ways. Either it's enforced,
right,
or they become at the same, on par in terms of pricing. Right now, they're slightly more expensive. But
right.
if they come to the point where it's the same price, I think everybody would choose the greener option.
To your original question, too, about like Lyft, while we haven't seen it on the ground yet, if you look at like Siemens and their orders for new high-speed trains, they're at an all-time record high, right?
Oh.
Because these countries are saying, okay, we're going to need this lift, and so we're going to make these purchases. They had the largest purchase they'd ever had last year, and it's just extraordinary to see, these other lead indicators of where this is going.
Yeah.
Is really fascinating.
Yeah, that's not something I had heard. That is interesting. So, I'm also curious, Nicole, Mozio provides transfers at airports around the world, trains, buses, taxis, all of that. Do you see growth in any certain types of transportation?
So for us, it's actually probably a little bit the opposite. We've seen a lot, I think during the pandemic, people shied away a little bit from shuttles and maybe buses a little bit more, and we've had a lot of companies that, say, did packaged holidays. So an example would be someone like TUI. They've come to us and said, can you give passengers now the option to upgrade to a private transfer?
Oh.
So we've had a huge increase in terms of types of transfers, in terms of private transfers, so that you give everybody the options. You give, for Mozio, the focus for us is always as much variety as possible. We want all the levels of service. in all the different places. And we do, for us, we do any point-to-point transfer. Nothing, it doesn't have to be airport to hotel. That is originally where we started. But really, from the train to your hotel, from your hotel to the cruise port, really looking at as much variety as we can do.
Yeah, well, so let's talk a bit more about that idea also of integration of the long distance and the last mile. I mean, what else needs to happen there? What's holding it back?
Well, I don't know. Well, a part of it's the technology, frankly. I mean, to be able to do journey planning, that's truly door to door. I mean, if you look at, there are lots of great planning apps like Google Maps, but they tend to run you down a single vertical, right? You have to pick public transportation, or I'm driving a car, and then it maps out how you're going to do that. True multimodal, where you're optimizing across modes of transit, there aren't many players that do that very well. You'll see some very good apps, like a City Mapper is a great example. Excellent app for planning your journey around a city or within a certain distance of a downtown area. But those planning apps, none of them actually book, right? So you then have to drop into Uber or Trainline or some other vertical, right? No one's really figured out how to do the two together, actually doing door-to-door plus the transaction component. And I think that will be a real up-and-coming area in this space of people who figure out how to do that.
What's holding that back then, I wonder? Is it technologically very challenging?
Yeah, there's quite a bit of fragmentation across these modes of transit, right?
Yeah.
Trying to integrate cars and buses and trains. I mean, you're talking about, how do you tie into a train line for just that component of the booking of rail?
Right.
But they're not tied in at all with the other pieces. The part of the reason the ecosystem of travels works so well is that there are GDS companies who've done this for us. They've done an excellent job of really aggregating up the content, normalizing all the data, making this stuff work together. You essentially need a GDS to do this in some form.
Right.
Or it could be a startup company that does it, but you need somebody who's got the kind of capital and the technical prowess to actually do that kind of integration work, which is not simple.
Yeah, you agree?
Yeah, no, I think the way that we've gone about it is gone for each individual vertical and tried to be the last mile for each of the individual verticals. But I think the long-term goal is exactly what you're saying, is, letting someone book a multimodal journey, directly from their house, and if they want to take the train, and they can book the entire way through. So I think it's coming, I really do. But for us anyway, it's been step by step.
We've seen, you see some people thinking about this, like Uber has now integrated rail into their product, and I think they've got bus as well. Yeah. And so they're thinking about these multiple modes and doing more of a regional ground transit. So it'll be interesting how this space evolves.
Yeah, I was actually just going to ask about that. They're in partnership with Mozio. They're testing that primarily in the UK. Do you expect to see maybe more of this collaboration or potentially even some consolidation in the industry?
In terms of consolidation, I think there's so many different players. I think the more people work together, the better product you come up with. So I'm always a big fan of collaboration. We work with so many different groups, and I think each time you just get a little better. We work with many of our so-called competitors because we offer something maybe slightly better than they do, and then they give us something that we don't do as well. Yeah. And I think that collaboration always works out better for the companies involved as well as for all the customers.
Yeah, but you'll likely see some consolidation. I mean, Dara, who runs Uber, is a deal machine. I mean, that's what he is. It's in his DNA. So will he acquire stuff? Absolutely. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how it evolves.
Yeah, for sure. Well, as we're getting close to the end of our time here, I have to ask both of you the AI question, because of course it's what everybody's talking about, generative AI, ChatGPT. Just any thoughts about that, potentially how it might impact some of your operations internally at your companies, or any opportunities that you see to use it in a more consumer-facing way?
I think personally, I think it's exciting. I think there's so many opportunities. The idea that you could, go on to somewhere and say, I need to book this, and you just come up with all of your options, everything planned out for you. So I think for Mozio, the focus is on becoming involved in those apps so that when they do show the options, we're one of the options. Yeah. And so it's, it's a new space, trying to learn as much as you can. and seeing where the key players are to become involved so that you have that opportunity.
Yeah.
I think it's going to have a huge impact on the travel space. I think there are, in particular on the intermediaries, there are two kinds of intermediaries. You're either a middleman where you sit on top of other people's data, or you're an aggregator of the data itself. So you're either Expedia or you're Amadeus. And in that scenario, Amadeus is going to win because it's their data. They're the ones that are normalizing the data. They're the ones that are aggregating the data. And Expedia is just a middleman on top. I did a search coming into Barcelona. I wanted to test this, and I actually did a search on Bard versus Google for romantic weekend hotel. And it's an astonishing set of different results. The Google result on the main page is basically paid for above the fold. And then it says, here are romantic hotels, and it served me up 250. That's not good advice.
Yeah.
And then below that are a set of SEO links that the OTAs have optimized to be able to shove their content into that first page. So as a consumer, it's a terrible set of results. Go to Bard, I ask it the same question, and it gives me 4 perfect answers. It says, these are our 4 recommendations, 2 sentences with a beautiful photograph, any of which I would have clicked to buy. And I think that's going to have a massive impact. I think it will drive traffic directly to hoteliers in that sort of format if they're the ones that are behind it. But I'm not going to need an OTA in the middle of that mix.
Yeah.
And as Chamath Palihapitiya, who's one of the all-time great thinkers and investors, says, these guys that are pure middlemen are going to zero over the next 10 years in terms of market cap valuation. And it remains to be seen, but it'll be very interesting how the space works out.
Did you pick a hotel?
I didn't, because I'm in the middle of a conference. I didn't have a choice at the conference.
Yeah, well, definitely be super interesting to follow what's happening there. All right, well, we are out of time. Nicole and Aaron, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank
you,
you.
Mitra.
All right, bye-bye.
Pleasure.